One of the things that's really nice about Agilent is our international entities operate from a local currency perspective, but all of our intercompany flows as U.S. dollars. So it's very easy for me to spot where our exposures are. Additionally, we have one ERP system, so I'm not at a disadvantage in that I'm having to pull the data from a lot of different sources. So I have just the one data source. We had a treasury management system already in place, and we had a cobbled, I'd call it, version of how we would gather our data. It was a mix of a treasury management system, some worksheets, and some manual processes. So we were looking to move away from the cobbled process and get to something that's more straight through. So you'll find on this chart we have speed, focus, accountability, trust, innovations, integrity. Those are watchwords within Agilent. And so everything that we do is around how can we better service clients using and keeping all those in mind. So the Treasury Group's no different than any other finance group. We're looking to make sure that we're providing information quickly, whether it's to the treasurer, the CFO, or any of our business groups. So our focus was really around how do we continue to maintain the focus that we have, that we already understand what our exposure is, but to really have some time to do some strategic analysis, which was hard under our prior setup because we spent a lot of time doing manual processes. It was always our goal to be a partner, whether it was to our accounting teams, to our business groups, to our local entities. But I don't think we were able to fully provide that value, number one, nor was it really fully appreciated. There was a large focus on from our IT teams to really evaluate manual processes, get rid of manual processes, develop interfaces, things that could be automated where you might have an upfront cost, but over the long run, you would have an increased reduction in your cost structure. And so that was definitely a big driver. Treasury had started looking for alternatives to have STP on our own, but it really didn't take any real drive until the IT team joined and said, hey, we're looking to reduce costs, and you guys have pretty material expenses here in supporting the systems that you're using. How can we reduce that? So that was really sort of the final driver for getting this off the ground. What we discovered was if you want a cash management tool, that's a very mature tool, and there are a lot of providers that would probably do a very good job of that. On the FX side, probably because of its complexity, we found that either a system was very good on the accounting end, but not so great on gathering the data, or vice versa, where you could gather the data and have some really good decision information, but then it really failed on the accounting side. So we came to the conclusion the only way to get this to really work, because both of those are key and very important to making the program work well, was to pick the best of each. So we gather the data, we get an actuals from the Oracle system that we're utilizing, and we drop that into FiREapps. From there, in terms of deriving our final position, we start with a weighted average trend. We have found that for us, a base is to just look at the last 3 months. We review the last 6 months. We always look at it in context of the last half of what's taken place. But in terms of calculating what we think the next month's forecast is going to be, we start with a 3-month average. We now share that with our local controllers. So each business entity has a controller who supports them. We share that with the controller who has on-the-ground knowledge of what's going to happen, and they will revert back to us with modifications to that forecast. Sometimes they're minor. Sometimes they keep the forecast as it was generated by the system. Sometimes they have information that's going to make a big change. So we have them feed that back to us, and we load that in, which overrides the 3-month forecast. We have a cash team who actually forecasts the cash balances. They provide that to us in an Excel spreadsheet that also gets loaded. So we can tweak whatever forecast is being driven from the system. We have about 45 entities that we're trading for, and for us, that's about 8 currency pairs to the dollar. One of the issues that we had with the prior program was that we just did a lot of double entry. So we would enter data into our Treasury application, which calculated a forecast for us. We would then pull that out of the Treasury system, drop it into a spreadsheet, do further manipulations, and in some cases duplicate what we'd already entered, to then have a third step, which was to then calculate a final position. So there was just lots of steps, lots of places along the way we could make an error. And I was looking to avoid that so that we could have more time to do the analytics and really look at it and say, what does this tell me, instead of have I entered all the information I need to in the spreadsheets. We typically have at least 2, sometimes 3 passes of redoing our forecast before we finalize it. So whereas in the old system, that would have been very difficult for us to do. If we'd had 2 passes, that would have been a great month. Additionally, having the opportunity to share this information well in advance of when we need to have it with the controllers so that we get their input was something we could not have conceived of before we had this process. For us, we wanted to have all of the exposure and the forecast in one system, and that's what FiREapps is doing for us. It's holding that entire position so that from a reporting perspective, we can always go back and look at the entire structure within Agilent. But from a practical perspective, we have some locations where we have to hedge onshore. And so we don't want to pass that information to the 360T trading platform. So as part of the interface or calculation of what to push out to 360T on the interface, FiREapps has put in some rules for us that allows us to pull out any of those manual applications, and that it still prepares a trade ticket for us so that we know what the final transaction should be. But then it allows us to manage it through either a verbal communication, an email communication with either the bank or our local traders. Our program has a 1-year horizon, and every quarter we are looking at the forward 4 quarters. So it's a rolling 1-year horizon that we're reviewing. And we look at it in the components of revenue, cost of goods sold, and OPEX, with a third view of by business group. So in our old setup, it was completely driven by a worksheet that had interfaces so that we could do some modeling from it, but it was particularly difficult to manage. We were getting input from our business groups. We were trying to copy and paste those into a new spreadsheet to do further calculations, and each time there would be a change in the model, it was very difficult to make sure that the final output that we had was really what we were expecting. So today, we still have the same horizon. It's still a 4-period horizon that we look at every quarter, broken up by the revenue, cost of goods sold, and OPEX that we look at by our business divisions. What's different is we provide out to them a template that they complete as to what they would expect those revenue, cost of goods sold, and OPEX costs to be, or revenue streams to be. And we can consolidate that inside of the FiREapps application so that we have a response on that, usually within 20 minutes. It's however long it takes us to do the upload into FiREapps, and then we've got a couple reports that we generate. So it's a pretty quick trade-off from where we were. Additionally, it allows us to take our 25% increments and spread it across 4 quarters so we can see very quickly where our exposures are. So we have the option of quickly seeing either by business or by currency what our cash flow streams are going to be for the next 4 quarters. And we have flexibility listed here as the first item, and by far that's probably a huge piece of what we have to thank the FiREapps process for. We can now quickly make changes into our structure if we need to. We announced last week that we're going to make an acquisition, and it's going to remain a standalone business. So in our old structure, we would have been fretting about how we were going to update our spreadsheets. Now we have a system that's going to easily allow us to make that change and incorporate the data as though it had always been there. I've talked about the efficiency that we have. Really, realistically, in our prior structure, we were processors. We were not doing a lot of analytics. There was some, but not nearly as much as we should be. We probably have a threefold increase in operational efficiency by really having an opportunity to look at what's going on both on the balance sheet and on the cash flow side, sharing that information with groups who previously were not part of the process, and having a greater communication feedback loop with the people who are on the ground versus us who's trying to place a hedge and make it efficient for them. We have transparency from reports that we can manipulate in a host of ways, and we do, trying to get the best information to share. And through all of that, we've maintained the compliance and the control that we need from a SOX perspective. And by having the FiREapps tool that shows us where cash is, we can choose to hold local currency instead of dollars much easier, and we can work with the on-the-ground teams to tweak how much cash we should be holding in local cash versus how much cash we should have in USD. So, and that's becoming part of our DNA. So it's a process that we just, every month when we look at the balance sheets, we're looking to see how much of a natural hedge we can place out there.